My partner of 5 years had a secret account sending money to his family. I found out when the bank rejected our mortgage because of his transactions. What I found when I started looking changed what I thought our life was. There are financial secrets in a relationship that are not built in a single day. They are built transaction by transaction. With the patience of someone who has decided that there is a part of their financial life that the person with whom they share everything else does not need to see. Not because they do not trust, but because they know that if the other person saw it, they would have questions. And the questions would complicate something that for them has a logic they do not want to negotiate. My partner had made that decision. For 5 years. With an account I did not know existed. With transfers that added up to more than double what we had saved together. And I found out not because he told me or because I discovered on my own, but because the bank that evaluated our mortgage application did its job and found what I had not looked for. My name is Valentina. I am 33 years old. I am a project coordinator at a logistics company, and I spent 5 years with a man named Emilio, who is 35, who is a civil engineer, and who until the Thursday the bank called us with the answer to our application was the person I thought I was building something solid and shared with. 5 years. Rented apartment together for 3. Decision made last year to look for something of our own. Joint savings we had built with discipline over 2 years for the down payment. A plan both of us had discussed enough times to feel real and close. The Thursday of the bank was the Thursday that plan revealed it had a layer I had not seen. The bank executive's name was Sophia. She had attended us during the pre-qualification process with the cordial efficiency of someone who does this every day. When she called Thursday to give us the answer, her tone was the tone of someone who has to communicate something that is not what the client expected to hear. She told us the application had been rejected, that the main reason was the movement profile on Emilio's account, which showed a pattern of periodic international transfers of significant amounts that the risk evaluation system interpreted as undeclared financial commitments that affected the projected payment capacity. I asked what periodic international transfers meant. She told me the history showed regular international transfers over the previous 4 years to accounts in another country. I asked what amounts. She gave me an approximate range the bank had identified as recurring. I hung up. I sat looking at the table in front of me. Emilio was beside me. He said nothing, and the silence he did not fill was his first response before I asked any question. I asked him whether he knew what transfers the executive was referring to. He told me yes. I asked him why he had not told me about them. He told me he did not want to worry me. That answer, in that moment, was enough for me to know that what was coming next was going to be bigger than he did not want to worry me. What Emilio told me over the following hour, I'm going to tell in the way I received it, as information that arrived in layers, each one denser than the last. The first layer, he had been sending money to his family in his country of origin for 4 years. His parents, his younger sister who was at university, his mother's health expenses that had come up 2 years ago and had increased the amounts. The second layer, the total amounts over 4 years added up to approximately 380,000 pesos. The third layer, he had an account at a different bank from the one I knew that he used exclusively for those transfers and whose movements had never appeared in any conversation between us because it was an account he managed in a completely separate way. The fourth layer, the joint savings we had built for the down payment amounted to 160,000 pesos. 380,000 going out. 160,000 together. For years, I did not interrupt while he spoke. When he finished, I told him I needed time to process what I had just heard and that night I was going to stay at my friend Claire's house. He asked whether we could keep talking. I told him yes. Tomorrow. That night with Clara, I did not sleep well, but I thought clearly, which is sometimes more useful than sleeping well. What I thought about that night had 2 levels. The first was the emotional level that does not need much explanation. 5 years with someone who had an entire part of their financial life I did not know. A shared life plan built on a foundation that was incomplete because one of the 2 people building it had never put on the table information that changed the complete picture. The second level was more practical and was the one that most needed clarity before the conversation the next day. What do I want to happen now? Not in terms of the relationship yet, but in terms of the financial structure of what we had built together. because the money he had sent was not money we had spent together on something we both chose. It was money that had come out of his income, which was his, but that had left in silence for 5 years while we built a joint project that required both of us to put in everything we could. And the question I needed to answer before talking to him was this a conversation about values and trust, about money and structure, or about both things at the same time? It was about both things. Friday's conversation was the longest we had in 5 years. Emilio arrived with the disposition of someone who knows they have to explain something and who is prepared to do so. I told him I was listening, but that first I needed him to understand what my real questions were, not to attack him, but so the conversation could reach somewhere useful. I told him I understood the origin of the transfers, that his family needed support and that he gave it to them. That was not the problem in itself. The problem was that for 5 years, while we built a life project that required both of us to be transparent about our financial situation, he had managed a significant part of his finances in silence. That was not privacy. It was information I needed to make real decisions about our shared life. That if I had known 3 years ago that he was sending that amount regularly to his family, we would have had a different conversation about what was possible for us and in what time frame. Not to tell him he could not help his family. But so the plans we made had as their basis the complete reality and not the version he had decided was enough for me. Emilio listened. He did not defend himself. He told me he had been afraid that if he told me I would think his family was a burden or that he had divided loyalties. I told him I understood that fear, and that acting from that fear for 5 years without asking me whether my real response would have been what he feared was the decision that could not go unnamed. There was a moment in that conversation where I asked him something directly, whether at any point he had thought about telling me about the account and the transfers and had actively decided not to. He took a while. He told me yes, that there had been moments where he had been about to say something and had chosen not to because the moment did not seem right or because he did not want to create a disagreement. I told him I appreciated him telling me honestly, and that was exactly the distinction that mattered. It had not been omission through carelessness. It had been an active decision repeated for 4 years. That was not the same thing. The weeks that followed were a process Emilio and I navigated in a way I would not have predicted in the days immediately after the Thursday of the bank. We did not end a relationship immediately. We also did not continue as if nothing had happened. What we did was something harder. Sit down with the financial advisor Clara recommended and review the complete situation. His income, mine, the commitments he had with his family, what that meant for what was possible for us as a couple in terms of life project, and in what time frame. The conversation with the advisor was revealing because it put real numbers on something that until that point had been emotional. The advisor told us that with Emilio's current commitments to his family and our combined incomes, a mortgage credit was possible, but with an additional 2 years of saving if commitments remained at the current level, or sooner if they were renegotiated. That information was something we needed to have had 2 years ago. What happened with the relationship, I am going to say with the honesty it deserves. We stayed together, not because the secret went without consequences, but because Emilio did something in the following weeks that mattered more than any explanation. He gave me complete access to all his accounts, showed me the complete 4-year history, had a conversation with his family about the amounts and the sustainability of that support over the long term, and proposed that financial decisions that affected both of us be made together explicitly, not as mutual control, as real transparency. The difference between those two things is the difference between a couple that distrusts and a couple that stays informed. We are in the second category now. We were not before. There is something I want to say about support for the family of origin in couples where one of the two has financial commitments to family members in another country or in a situation of need. That commitment is real and it is legitimate. And it is also information the couple needs to have to be able to build a shared project on a real foundation. It is not incompatible to be the person who supports their family and to be transparent with your partner about what that implies financially. What is incompatible is building a joint life project while managing in silence a part of your finances that changes the complete picture of what is possible for both. Emilio loved his family, and he also loved me. And for 4 years, he had managed both those things in separate compartments because he thought that was the way to protect both. What he had not calculated was that separate compartments do not protect both things. They erode both. Because a relationship that does not have complete information is not a relationship that is choosing its path. It is a relationship being directed by the person who decides what information to share. What I want you to take from this story has practical parts and a more personal part. The practical part first. If you're building a life project with someone that includes shared financial goals like a mortgage, a business, or joint savings, you need to have an explicit conversation about both your complete financial situations. Not just incomes, commitments, debts, family support, regular expenses that come out of each account. Everything that affects what is possible for both of you. That conversation can be uncomfortable. It is less uncomfortable than discovering it when the bank rejects an application. The more personal part, when someone who loves you makes decisions about information you both need to have, because they fear your reaction, the problem is not only the secret. It is that they never gave you the opportunity to show that your real reaction would have been different from the one they feared. That is also something that can be named. And naming it, even late, can change how the relationship works going forward. In our case, it changed it. If this story moved you, comment. Do you have open conversations about finances with your partner, or are there topics you avoid? Like if you believe financial commitments to family of origin are information a partner has the right to know. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who is building financial goals with their partner. Practical tip. If you're thinking about a mortgage or any shared financial goal, sit down first with all account statement from both of you from the past 12 months, including all accounts, and review the regular movements together. Not as a conduct review, but as a real financial diagnosis. What appears in that conversation is the foundation from which you can plan something.